In small-town America, there are places that feel frozen in time, where neighbors wave from their porches, where Sunday mornings are filled with hymns drifting from the church steeple, and where trust runs deep like the roots of the oldest oak tree in the yard. Independence, Missouri was one of those towns, a quiet place where life followed a steady rhythm, faith, family, and community. The kind of town where people left their doors unlocked and believed evil was something that lived somewhere else. But sometimes, evil doesn't come from the outside. Sometimes, it's sitting right next to you at church. This is the true story of Randy Stone, a devoted husband, a loving father, a respected businessman, and a man whose faith would lead him straight into the hands of betrayal. Randy Stone was born on June 14, 1967, in Kansas City, Missouri, a boy molded by the heartland. His parents, Leonard and Clara, raised him on hard work, loyalty, and a deep belief in doing right by others. Those who knew him described him as a man of contrasts. Strong enough to bench his own weight, yet tender enough to write poetry for the woman he loved. After graduating high school in 1986, Randy joined the Marine Corps. For nearly 4 years, he served his country with honor. But when his time in uniform ended, his heart called him home. Back to Kansas City, back to the familiar streets of his childhood, and back to someone who had quietly been waiting there all along. Her name was Teresa Greenawalt. She was beautiful, outgoing, and full of charisma. Their families had known each other for years, bound by the closeness of small-town life. What began as a friendly reunion soon became something more, a spark neither of them could ignore. After just 7 months of dating, Randy and Teresa were married in 1990. Their faith made a church wedding not just a formality, but a sacred promise before God, a vow they intended to keep for life. Soon came children, Michael and Miranda. Randy embraced fatherhood with the same passion he brought to everything else. He was a dad who never missed a birthday, never skipped a school play, and never failed to remind his family how much he loved them. By 1997, Randy had opened his own insurance office in Independence, working under Farmers Insurance. For more than a decade, he built a life from scratch. Clients trusted him, neighbors admired him, and his name became synonymous with honesty. Teresa worked beside him, managing clients in the home with grace. Together, they seemed unstoppable, financially comfortable, emotionally connected, and spiritually grounded. At least, that's how it appeared. Faith was at the core of the Stone family, the pillar holding their lives together. Every Sunday, they sat in the same pew at New Hope Baptist Church. Randy wasn't just a member. He was part of its foundation. He drove the church bus, taught Sunday school, handled the records, and managed the finances with precision and pride. Teresa served with equal devotion, cooking for church dinners, singing in the choir, planning community events. Together, they represented everything the congregation valued: love, commitment, and faith. But in the same pews where they found purpose, another family shared that spotlight: the family of Pastor David Love, born into a line of missionaries. David Love seemed destined for ministry. He was charismatic, commanding, and confident. His sermons stirred hearts, his presence filled rooms, and his voice carried weight both in the pulpit and beyond it. He and his wife, Kim Love, appear to be the perfect couple, married since 1982, with 3 children and a reputation as the embodiment of faith. Kim, with her warm southern charm, was loved by nearly everyone in the congregation, yet behind their polished smiles, cracks had already begun to form. Before his time at New Hope, whispers followed Pastor Love from a church in Virginia, whispers about missing money, $30,000 unaccounted for, and a quiet resignation that ended his ministry there. No one in Independence knew the full truth. Or maybe they just didn't want to. After all, forgiveness was the foundation of faith, wasn't it? For Randy and Teresa Stone, the church was home. For Pastor Love, it was power. And when faith, trust, and temptation collide, even the most sacred places can become the stage for something unholy. This is only the beginning. Welcome to Echoes of the Past. From the outside, the church hummed with Sunday chatter and the polite smiles of neighbors. Behind closed doors, however, conversations carried a different tone. Whispers, furtive glances, and attention that settled like dust in the rafters. Kim had noticed it first. The way certain women in the congregation lingered near the pulpit. The way their smiles seemed aimed more at the man who preached than the message itself. It shouldn't have meant much. Admiration is common in small towns. But Kim's instincts were sharp, and one woman in particular kept tugging at them. Teresa Stone. Then came 2004, a moment that should have brought only joy. Teresa was pregnant. Instead of celebration, a single fact cast a long, cold shadow. Randy had undergone a vasectomy years earlier. For many, that truth would ignite suspicion or confrontation. For Randy, it sparked confusion and, tragically, clinging hope. He told himself vasectomies sometimes fail. He'd miss a follow-up, a loophole in his mind that let him believe. The pregnancy ended in miscarriage, and with it went any clear evidence. Questions remained, like embers waiting for a gust of wind. By 2008, those embers flared into a blaze. Randy, consumed by doubt and uneasy about what he'd seen and sensed, made a choice that shocked neighbors and friends. He announced his intention to resign from New Hope Baptist Church, a decision born from a brutal accusation. He believed Pastor David Love and Teresa were entangled in something more than spiritual counseling. People reacted the way small towns often do. Defensively, Pastor Love would never. They said, Teresa loves Randy. Trusted voices urged Randy to stay, to bury his suspicions, to preserve the family and the fellowship. He listened. He doubted himself. He stayed. Then Kim, the pastor's wife, offered a lifeline wrapped in doctrine, counseling. When Teresa caught Randy watching adult films, David, whose job was to shepherd souls, proposed private sessions to help Randy reclaim his faith and fidelity. Reluctantly, Randy agreed. He sat across from the man he feared had betrayed him and confessed his shame, his weakness, his worries. For 2 years he poured out his heart in those quiet rooms. 2 years while forbidden relationship, as investigators would later learn, tightened and deepened in secret. March 31st, 2010 dawned ordinary. Shops opened, children boarded buses, and the town moved through predictable rhythms. That afternoon, Teresa went to Randy's insurance office. Something felt off the moment she stepped onto the sidewalk. The blinds were drawn, midday unusually closed. Randy's car sat in the lot. The office, locked. With a key, Teresa entered. She called his name. No answer. She checked storerooms, peeked behind desks, the routine of workplace life morphing into a slow, heavy unease. Then she found him. Randy lay on the floor of his office, motionless. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and silent, staining carpet and conscience. For a heartbeat that stretched like a snapped wire, Teresa froze. Panic replaced paralysis. She reached her phone, but instead of dialing 911 first, she called her parents. Ree's been shot. He's dead, she told them. Her parents urged her to call emergency services. She did. But her words to the dispatcher were strange and halting. She spoke of an unresponsive husband, of blood from his ear, unable or unwilling to say the word that would make everything real. Murder. Within minutes, Kim arrived, then David. When police sealed the scene and began the grim work inside, David stepped back, leaving Kim to guide Teresa away. Outside, church life continued in shocked murmurs. Inside, the picture grew darker. Randy had been shot once, the bullet burying the back of his head. There were no signs of a struggle, no upended chairs, no scuffle that might suggest robbery or a random attack. Money on his desk remained untouched. This was not the work of opportunity. It was execution, precise, personal, planned. For investigators, the case had a sickening familiarity. The murder weapon was a .222 caliber handgun, later traced to the Stone's own home. Someone had taken Randy's gun from behind his locked door, used it to end his life, and then disposed of the weapon. In every step, the killer showed access, knowledge, and cold deliberation. Interviews with friends, co-workers, and parishioners began to reveal a pattern. People remembered Teresa and David lingering together. They remembered looks that lasted too long and conversations that slipped from pastoral to personal. But it was a phone record that would strip the last excuses away. In the days leading up to murder, Teresa and David had exchanged a flurry of calls and texts, timing and frequency that suggested planning not consolation. When pressed, Teresa's story wavered. At first, she clung to the safe narrative, pastor and parishioner, counseling and friendship. But the walls of that story crumbled under evidence. Tearful and trembling, Teresa admitted that the relationship had stretched far beyond conversation. It had been 10 years in the making, a slow erosion of vows and vows replaced by secrecy. What had started as friendship, she said, had become something carnal, then something she called love, and then she revealed something worse. In hushed, broken phrases, Teresa told investigators that David had spoken of removing the obstacles between them, not by divorce, not by separation, but by permanent means. He had allegedly laid out a grim plan. Both spouses removed, the complications of marriage and property and conscience eliminated. It was monstrous in its simplicity, as if a sermon on sin had slipped into a conspiracy. When police moved to bring David in for questioning, he had vanished. He'd packed his family and driven away, leaving a stunned congregation in his wake. But disappearance in the digital age is a poor defense. Cell towers, gas purchases, and a trail of small, telltale mistakes led officers to South Carolina. On April 15, 2010, 2 weeks after Randy's death, David Love was found and arrested, not in a blaze of drama, but in the quiet surrender of a man trying and failing to melt into obscurity. Months later, with the noose tightening and the reality of prison looming, Teresa made a choice. Hoping for leniency, she unspooled the truth. She confessed that she had given David the keys to the Stone's house, the code to the gun safe, and the intimate details of her husband's schedule, exactly when he would be alone and vulnerable. Investigators recovered a single chilling message she'd sent. "I want him dead." For words that turned suspicion into proof. For words that painted premeditation in black ink. This revelation shifted the case from betrayal to conspiracy. It didn't end here. The questions multiplied. How far had this deception been allowed to spread? Who else had turned away? And could a man of the cloth really orchestrate such violence from behind the pulpit? Stay with me. In the next part, we follow the evidence trail, courtroom drama, and a heartbreaking fallout for two families left to pick up the pieces. For 2 long years, Pastor David Love had been counseling Randy Stone. Week after week, Randy sat across from the man he believed was helping him rebuild his faith, not realizing he was sitting face to face with the architect of his own destruction. Every confession, every insecurity, every flicker of doubt Randy shared became another weapon in David's quiet, patient manipulation. The pastor wasn't saving a soul. He was preparing a sacrifice. When the truth finally cornered him, David Love didn't fight it. He struck a deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action, a desperate attempt to escape the death penalty. The court handed down a life sentence, but with a small window of mercy, eligibility for parole after 25 years. Teresa Stone, the woman who had once stood beside Randy as his loving wife, received just 8 years for her role in the murder, thanks to her cooperation and the chilling testimony she provided. And it was in that testimony that something even darker came to light. Teresa revealed that David Love had once plotted to kill his own wife, Kim. He had detailed how he would do it: break her neck, stage the scene as a car accident, push the vehicle down an embankment. It was a plan born of arrogance, madness, and obsession. Fortunately, it was a plan that never came to pass. In 2013, Kim Love sat down with ABC News alongside her children. Their faces told a story words could never capture: a betrayal, heartbreak, and a faith tested beyond measure. And yet, astonishingly, they spoke not of revenge, but of forgiveness. Kim divorced David, rebuilt her life, and chose healing over hatred. Meanwhile, Teresa Stone, Randy's mother, could barely speak without her voice trembling under the weight of sorrow. She remembered her son as a man who loved endlessly, who worshiped his wife and cherished his family. He loved her until the day he died, she said, her words echoing like a prayer no one wanted to say aloud. When Teresa received her sentence, Clara wept, not out of justice served, but for the family that had been forever broken. The illusion of a happy, faithful home had been replaced by deceit, betrayal, and blood on the carpet of a quiet Missouri office. In time, Michael and Miranda, the children left behind, made an impossible choice. They forgave their mother because, in their words, they had already lost one parent, and they couldn't bear to lose another. Today, David Love sits behind bars at the Southeast Correctional Center in Charleston, Missouri. He'll be eligible for parole in 2036, at the age of 76. Teresa has since walked free, rebuilding a new life with another partner in Kansas City. Her name now whispered only in passing, her past buried under layers of silence. But silence has a way of echoing. The story of Randy Stone is not just a tale of murder, it's a warning, because evil doesn't always look like a monster in the shadows. Sometimes it stands at the pulpit. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring. Sometimes it smiles and says, "Let us pray." Here at Echoes of the Past, we tell the stories that time tried to bury, the sins that are behind stained glass and whispered promises. If the story gripped you, don't look away. There are more truths waiting to be unearthed, more echoes still haunting the past. Inside the walls of the Southeast Correctional Center, time moves differently. For Pastor David Love, every tick of the clock is a reminder, not of the sermons he preached, but of the sins he committed under the shadow of the cross. He once stood before hundreds, his voice rising in passionate praise. Now, his words echo off concrete walls, swallowed by silence. His followers believed he was a man of God, a shepherd of faith. But behind that warm smile and gentle sermons was something far darker. A man who used faith as camouflage for obsession, lust, and murder. The investigation would later reveal how carefully he planned it all. How he manipulated Teresa's mind until she believed there was no way out but blood. David convinced her that God wanted them to be together, that their love was destined, even if it meant taking a life to achieve it. Those who knew the couple said Teresa seemed torn, lost between guilt and devotion. But when she handed him the gun, when she gave him the code to the safe, she sealed Randy Stone's fate, and perhaps her own. When detectives pieced together the timeline, they saw something that chilled them to the core. David had been planning Randy's death long, before he ever pulled the trigger. He had used every counseling session to gather details. When Randy worked, when he was alone, even how the blinds in his office would fall just right to conceal the scene. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a sermon of control, a message written in blood. Randy's death left a hole that no amount of justice could fill. A quiet town in Missouri would never see its church the same way again. The pulpit that once inspired hope became a symbol of betrayal. And the congregation that once trusted their pastor learned that sometimes the devil wears a collar. Years later, when people speak of the case, they still ask the same haunting question. How could a man who preached love become capable of such evil? Some say power corrupts. Others say desire blinds. But maybe, just maybe, David Love believed he was untouchable, that his title made him godlike. And when a man starts believing he can rewrite morality itself, only tragedy can follow. As for Teresa, she served her time quietly. 8 years behind bars. 8 years to think about the man she loved, the husband she destroyed, and the family she shattered. When she walked free, she didn't look back. She built a new life in Kansas City, living in the shadows of her choices, far from the whispers of the church pews and courtroom lights. No one knows if she ever visits Randy's grave. Maybe she can't. Maybe she's too afraid of what she might feel if she stood there, staring at the name of the man who loved her more than life itself. The story of Randy Stone isn't just about murder. It's about misplaced faith, about love turned poisonous, about how a single secret, whispered between lovers, can spiral into something unholy. And in the end, it's a reminder that evil doesn't need to hide in the dark. Sometimes it stands in the light, holding a Bible. This has been another chilling tale from Echoes of the Past, where every secret buried in the quiet corners of history eventually finds its voice. If this story held you till the end, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because in the world of true crime, even the most righteous faces can hide the darkest sins.